So what if your AI assistant could do more than just, search for stuff? What if it could actually reason with the information it finds? Well, there's a new system called CLaRa that's trying to do exactly that. And it could totally change how AI thinks.
You've probably had this happen, right? You give an AI a bunch of documents, you ask it a question, and you know the answer is in there, but it still gets it wrong. It feels like it has all the puzzle pieces right in front of it, but just can't seem to put them together. It's a super common frustration, and it points to a much deeper problem. AI often has a really hard time understanding context and relevance.
Now, the solution we have right now is a technique called Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or just RAG. The easiest way to think about it is like giving the AI an open book test. Instead of just trying to remember things, it can look up facts in real time. This is huge because it helps prevent what we call hallucination, which is really just a fancy way of saying the AI makes stuff up when it doesn't know the answer.
But even with this open book, there's a pretty big problem hiding just under the surface. You see, most of these AI systems are built kind of like a two-person team, where the two people never, ever talk to each other. And that leads to a major communication breakdown.
Okay, let's break this down with an analogy. So on one side, you've got the retriever, we'll call it the librarian. Its only job is to go fetch documents. On the other side is the generator, let's call that one the author, who has to write the final answer. The problem is, the librarian just dumps this massive pile of documents on the author's desk and walks away. The author has absolutely no way to give feedback, so the librarian never learns what was actually useful. It's a completely one-way street. In the world of AI, this communication gap has a name: the broken gradient problem. Now, a gradient is just the signal that helps an AI learn from its mistakes. And because that signal, that feedback loop, is broken here, the author can't tell the librarian how to get better. They're basically stuck working in their own little silos, and they never learn how to operate like a smart, cohesive team. So how in the world do you fix this broken team? Well, that's exactly the problem a new approach called CLaR, that stands for Continuous Latent Reasoning, was designed to solve. And its solution is pretty clever: get both parts of the system to speak the same unified language. The big idea behind CLaRa is actually super elegant. Instead of having a separate librarian and a separate author, what if you could fuse them into a single unified mind? A system that communicates with itself perfectly because, well, it's all built on the same incredibly efficient shared language. This shared language uses something the paper calls shared continuous representations. Okay, what does that mean? Basically, instead of passing around huge, bulky documents, the system compresses everything into these tiny, meaning-packed summaries. Think of it like the perfect synopsis that the entire system can understand in an instant. So how do you actually build a system like this? It all happens in two really important stages. It involves creating what the researchers call a compressor and then a reasoner. All right, so the whole process happens in two stages. First, a compressor model is trained up to get really, really good at creating those dense summaries we talked about. Then, in stage two, the new and improved librarian, now called a query reasoner, is trained together with the generator as a single unified team. To teach this compressor what's actually important, it's not just trained to, spit back the text it was given. It's trained on a mix of different tasks: answering simple questions with a single fact, tackling complex questions where it has to connect multiple dots, and also paraphrasing, which forces it to keep the meaning while using fewer words. All this makes sure those compressed summaries are just packed with the most essential stuff. And here is where the magic happens. Because the entire system speaks this one shared language of summaries, that broken feedback loop is finally fixed. The author can now actually guide the librarian, and the whole system learns and improves together with one single mission: get the final answer right. Okay, so the theory sounds great, right? But does it actually work in the real world? The researchers put CLaRa through a whole series of tough tests on multiple question-answering benchmarks to find out.
And the results are just stunning. This chart shows how well CLaRa finds the right documents. It hits over 96% accuracy. Now get this, it's beating a baseline model that was basically given the answers ahead of time. It was explicitly told which documents were correct. CLaRa, on the other hand, only had weak supervision. That just means it was only told the final correct answer, not which documents to use. It literally taught itself how to be a better retriever just by focusing on the end goal. It's incredible. And here's something that just seems totally backwards at first. CLaRa, using its tiny little summaries, often did better than models that had the full raw text. It's that classic less is more idea.
By filtering out all the noise and the fluff, the compressed summaries forced the AI to focus only on what really mattered, which led to much sharper reasoning.
To really see this in action, let's look at a case study. The researchers gave CLaRa this really tough multi-step question. To answer this, you have to connect a bunch of different pieces of info. Who is Ivory Lee Brown's nephew? What team did he play for? And then what were his stats back in 2004?
And this is where we see CLaRa actually thinking. It didn't just search for Ivory Lee Brown. No, it understood the intent of the question and figured out that it needed to look for related concepts, like NFL and Oklahoma, words that weren't even in the original question. This isn't just searching anymore, this is active reasoning.
And by doing that, it successfully found 2 different documents, one that linked Ivory Lee Brown to his nephew, a guy named Adrian Peterson, and another that detailed Adrian Peterson's insane, record-breaking 1,925 rushing yards during his 2004 season at Oklahoma. It connected the dots all by itself and found the right answer.
So what does all of this mean for the future of AI and retrieval-augmented generation? Well, this is way more than just a small incremental improvement. Really, what this all boils down to is a pretty fundamental shift. CLaRa is helping to bridge that huge gap between an AI that can just find information and one that can truly reason with it. And why does this matter? Because unifying retrieval and generation into one single process leads to AI that's not just more accurate, but also way more efficient. It really feels like a foundational leap forward, paving the way for the next generation of genuinely intelligent AI assistants. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've gotten used to AI that can fetch documents for us, but this research pushes us to ask a much bigger question. What new possibilities are going to open up when our AI can move beyond just simple retrieval and start to truly reason?